Welcome to the BCTLE podcast, a resource made possible by the Beatty Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence at Taylor University. My name is Timothy Berkey. Every other week on this podcast, I get a chance to sit down and have a discussion with a previous guest host speaker of a BCTLE session. During our conversation, I get the chance to dive deeper, follow up on questions, explore additional resources, and have a conversation about what faith and learning integration looks like across our campus. Our focus at the BCTLE is on our calling as teachers, our care for students, and our design for learning. My special guest this week is Dr. John Moore. John has lived his professional life maintaining his passion for his content, seeking to improve his teaching, and engaging colleagues in discussions about teaching and student learning. Recently, the BCTLE hosted a guest host session where we got a chance to hear from John about this rhythm that has been at the heart of his calling as a teacher. I had the chance recently to sit down and have a conversation with John, and what I found was that this rhythm of being passionate, seeking to improve, engaging with others, that's not just a rhythm of John's teaching, that's a rhythm of who John is. He gives a lot of credit to the people who have influenced him. One of the things that I noticed is that this rhythm flows out of John's love for the Lord. I see in John's example what faith and learning being integrated could look like. So let's not wait any longer. Let's dive into my conversation with Dr. John Moore. John, welcome to the BCTLE podcast.
Well, thanks. It's been always a pleasure working with the BCTLE.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm really excited for our conversation today, John. In last week's BCTLE session, faculty had a chance to hear from you in your presentation on this rhythm of passion, improvement, and engagement. And we sort of started that conversation thinking about Colossians 1:28 and 29, and how this idea of starting with the end in mind, with what it is we are really setting ourselves up to do as faculty, as teachers, and what that role looks like from a biblical standpoint, really helped shape the conversation, I felt. We looked at the faculty who have helped to spark that passion in you and the importance of having passion for what we do. You shared a little bit about when you first started at Taylor teaching a class that you didn't expect to teach. That really resonated with me. In my first semester, I was teaching a class that I felt like I don't even know where to go with this. It really isn't even me, I didn't think. You talked about the importance of seeking to improve as a teacher and sort of respecting the process of improvement as we engage with our students. And then we sort of wrapped up our conversation talking about what engagement looks like with our colleagues. Engagement about our discipline, but also engagement about our craft as teachers. And I want to just sort of pull back for a second. John, how has this rhythm of passion, improvement, and engagement, how has this made a difference in your life as a teacher?
Well, they're really tied extremely well together. When I talked last week, I started off with the mission of the university became internalized for me in the sense I was there to help prepare students. And that's my focus. I'm not there to teach biology. Yeah, I'm there to teach biology, but I'm there to teach students. And for that, it meant whatever it was that they were needed to be taught in. And even though I was assigned, quote, plant biology, which was not my area of strength, it had to become, in a sense, an area of strength. So to put that in focus, to prepare students to reach a world which is in need, that verse in Colossians, in a sense, gave me some oversight of what that meant. And it's not just presenting information, teaching them, helping them work. It's also helping them to correct what they do wrong. That's the admonish part. And a lot of times we don't like the admonishment part or the correction part. We see it as punishment, not as making a change for the better. And I think if we continue to see that as our passion, it drives us to, one, I need to be able to teach better. I have to find out how students don't understand things, what's their common misconception. I'm always striving what would be the best way to provide them in the learning process and correct when they're not doing it accurately. How do you do that? Well, then you have to engage colleagues. You have to find out how to teach. It just becomes an overdriving situation. I am a passionate biologist, but I still remember Andy Whipple saying to me once, I'm not a researcher anymore. I'm an educator. That's my field. I'm not a microbiologist. I'm an educator. And he had gone through, I think, all the process that we do when we come out of our doctorates, and we're so thrilled with what we've learned and everything. And now I got to teach these freshmen and sophomores, and boy, they have a long way to go. But how do I do that? So it became a driving passion for me.
One of the things that just stood out in my mind was this comment that you made about how you think about your students and the amount of time that you need to spend thinking about what are they learning, what do I need to correct. I wonder, how has your course prep changed over the years? Do you still prep for courses like you did when you were in your 4th or 5th year teaching? Has it changed what you prep or how you prep or when you prep?
Well, prep is always there. So it has changed in the first, well, maybe 3 to 5 years. It was really learning the information differently than you had to when you took courses. I think a little bit better than what a lot of faculty, once you start to teach, and I've been a teacher a long time, not just in university, once you learn to teach, you are trying to organize the information in some form of conceptual understanding that it becomes part of you. So that's how I learn now, even on new information. It's always putting it into a teacher mode. So that prep changed. It changed from just knowing my information to being able to put it in a structure, which to first myself made a whole lot of sense. And then helping my students to learn to do the same thing. Don't just try to memorize. Don't that doesn't help you down the road. Try to put it in a cohesive, workable format that allows you to utilize this material down the road. So as my prep has changed over the years, it's, okay, I'm going in today and we're covering this topic. I wonder what's happened just this week in this area. They need to see it's current. They need to see it's applicable and how it may have been used from what I knew before, and to encourage them to think about, oh, gee, it's not just old information. This old information was building towards something that they're now using and doing things differently. So my prep is always an hour before. I'm going through the whole lecture, which I don't lecture. I'm coming up with questions. I'm pulling out maybe a little video I saw or a news item. And the whole idea is to get them to start to say in their own minds, okay, how do I put this together to understand it? Because I see that I'm going to be using it down the road. Now, it doesn't always work. So it's always trying to figure out, and each class may differ. Time of the day differs. So it's how can I be engaging them at all times along those lines? But that's what keeps teaching fresh. And it doesn't make it just, I'm presenting my lecture notes that I wrote 35 years ago and just reading to the students, which a, quote, lecturer does, but that's not what I do.
That seems to tie in so well to your emphasis on passion. One of the things that you sort of encouraged us to think about when it comes to passion is keeping it fresh, and that in order to keep our content fresh, we need to stay fresh. We need to continue to find our own, what it is in the content that we're talking about that sparks that passion. And so even the way that you're prepping has an impact on where that passion is. That seems like an important thing for us to think about, even as we work on classes that maybe we have been teaching 20, 25 years. I'm in the end of my third year, so I have quite a bit ways to go till that. I'm still in the relearning my content, I think, but finding that passion.
But that's getting better. That's, you're better than you were the first year. In bringing in, having colleagues. Andy Whipple is not here with us anymore. He retired 6 years ago. But having Jeffrey Gear around with questions in my area, they're the ones who are staying really current in certain areas, and then engaging them and saying, help me understand how this has just changed. And I saw this in the news and it hits your area. And this is where developing that community of fellow educators can be rather stimulating for you. Because someday you may just say, Andy, I need you to come in and talk to them about this. And I'll ask you the questions so you don't have to prepare. You're there already. I want to tease your brain in front of them, and so they can see that happening. So, having that good community, the BCTLE is there, but so is the whole university. And we need to tap into that.
You mentioned in your presentation the educators who have sparked a passion in your life, whether it was your time while you were a student here at Taylor or after you left and became an educator outside of Taylor. I've spent some time this weekend just sort of reflecting for myself on some of the educators who have sparked a passion in my life. I had a high school speech teacher, my very first speech teacher, who started me thinking about what the study of communication might look like. Her name was Mrs. Coble. I had a political science professor in undergrad, Dr. Claiborne, who helped me think about how the things that we were learning were good and important, but if I wasn't thinking about the needs in the community around me, then the knowledge that I was learning wasn't going to do much outside of myself. So I've been thinking this weekend about who some of these educators are in my own life. And a question that I have, and I've been thinking about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is what comes of that spark? And how do we as educators, now we're in the seat, we are the educators, how do you think we ought to be thinking about this responsibility, this opportunity of sparking passion?
That's an interesting one, because so many times that's not necessarily the focus of why we do it, is to spark a passion. What we're trying to do is engage our student. And going back, that like that one teacher did for you, that political science teacher, he corrected a thought process that you were thinking about and said, it's not valid. That has no value unless you really start taking it. That's that kind of that admonishment, that correction. So many times that can be the spark that someone needs to hear. There's a great story from J. Kessler that he talks about. And the other name I'm going to mention will probably pick up as well as historical here. But Jay, when he was here as a student, walked into the registrar, who was Olson, who, of course, our dorm is named after. And Jay was trying to get into something that he knew he had been too late to get into. And Dr. Olson just went through and said, so, Mr. Kessler, did you read the handbook? Yeah. Did you not understand the handbook? No. Then why are you asking me this question? And he would tell that story and was just saying, live with that. but next time do the correction, and he took that as a changing moment in his life. So don't be afraid don't think that only thing that's going to inspire them is a positive word. That happens all the time, but it may be a corrective word given in love and grace, but it's there that helps to change them. And listen to that voice that somehow appears. Uh, I have a wonderful past student, won't mention name, was pre-dent, but she was Korean. And she was in class and first year. So she had her translator on the desk. She had her notes. She's listening intently and, trying to keep up. She's taking all of these tests. And back then I gave a lot of hard multiple choice tests, but, she got the top scores. She was so beaten down by the process. And I just walked out of the lecture hall one day and I looked over to her and I just walked up to her and I said her name. She turned and I said, I want to just say, I'm so impressed with who you are because this is not your heart language. You work so hard and you do so well. I walked away and that was the voice she needed to hear at that moment. So some reason the Lord said to me, just say something to her. And that's all I did. But that was something that just she needed. So be willing to hear those things. Love your students. They have the same issues you do. So love them, and maybe a good word is helpful. I think of Miss Poe, who was our human anatomy physiology. She did that to me. When I was kind of beaten down, she said something to me and that changed my thoughts.
I love that because it isn't just the encouragement, which often we think about. We need to encourage our students, and absolutely, what a gift that must have been to your student. But it is also the holding the boundary or reminding them of the reality and being that gentle, corrective, loving, corrective force in their life. That can also spark passion because it makes it meaningful, right? It grounds it in this isn't just something I'm doing right now. It draws a clear line between here's why what I'm doing now matters, and here's how I can continue to grow, not just in my understanding of the content, but also just as a child of God, as a person who's contributing to my community. I can continue to grow in those ways as well.
Yeah, it helps you to be human to your students too, not just that figure who's in front of them, because that if you're correcting them, that means you care for them.
John, you'll know from our conversation last Thursday in our session, faculty had a chance to discuss some of the big ideas that came out of your presentation. And one of the things that we spent quite a bit of time talking about was the connection between grace and student expectations. And you actually mentioned in your presentation that you constantly address whether or not you are meeting students' needs as learners rather than just teaching students who learn like you learn. And that just, man, that hit me like a ton of bricks. Am I only teaching students who learn like I learn? And I've been thinking about that. And one of the things that I think maybe we can tie this together, this idea of grace, student expectations, the way students are learning, the way that we learn. What are the rhythms that you have in place that help you stay aware of student needs, that you can either think ahead or is it a reflective process? But how are you constantly addressing and noticing these expectations and needs?
I begin every week with about a 5-minute devotional that takes 7 minutes. I always talk a little bit more. Most of the time, it is something that has talked to me personally. So I'm not coming in to teach them a passage of the Bible. I'm coming into them and sharing how the Lord is still teaching me and how he humbles me, how I become so dependent. Oswald Chambers is a great author on his daily devotional. It's not about me, it's about him. Whatever the topic is, it's not about me, it's about him. And trying to bring that in as a focus for the week. Just a couple of weeks ago, I played a song from back in the 70s, which was called Feel the Nails. Does he still feel the nails every time I fail? Does he hear the crowd cry, crucify again? And do I really seriously, so I'm going through this with them, showing that I'm just as fallible as they are. That sets my tone for the week, especially when I had a bad week last week with people cutting out Thursday. We had a major lab activity and they're just not coming in. And when do they think that's, so all of that stuff, and I've got to constantly remind myself, I'm going to hold them accountable, just as my sin is going to be held accountable. We have grace through the Lord, but it cost him. How can I constantly remind them? There's always seems to be a price to be paid. It's who's paying that price. And I have to deal with it too. I don't want to seem like I'm condemning them. I'm wanting them to reflect, what did they do that they need to, again, improve on? Can that help us to move forward in our educational process? We all are there. I have faculty who, in being in certain roles at Taylor, they never turn anything in on time. The faculty, and they have such a good excuse. Well, this has happened, this happened. What do they do with their students who have those same good excuses? Do we understand that? I just always say it's just like taxes. If I turn it in late, I get a 10% penalty. No one there's getting upset. I'm not getting up. I can't blame them. I knew the statement. I'm going to accept it and move forward. And can we understand that that's what the process is all about?
That connection to grace and even how we think about our policies seems like an opportunity to sort of draw the red thread. If that's how we're going to think about our policies with our students, making them aware of what grace looks like, while also holding that boundary when it's appropriate. When we think about the student in class who just doesn't seem engaged, they are maybe they sit in the back and they're no notebooks open. They might have their computer open, but you can tell that they're shopping or they're browsing. Right, they're not there. How does that idea of grace, how do you translate that into reaching that student, teaching that student? Can you help us think about that a little bit?
Well, when we have someone engaged or not engaged, I think what strikes my mind first is, am I engaged with them? So that person is disconnected in the back of the room. It's time for me to engage them, which means I have to go present myself to them, talk to them, stand by them, or whatever that may be that engages them at that moment, instead of sitting up in the front and getting upset at them not being engaged. My wife and I have been watching The Chosen, and seeing how in that video, Christ is being portrayed as going into the sinners' dens, going into places where, the last one, it was the dinner with going to eat with Zacchaeus. So religious leaders are all upset because he's engaging those people, but that's a mindset. So I'm obviously what I'm trying to deal with the class is here's people who aren't engaged. Do I go sit with them? Do I go and talk to them? Do I go and teach them? Um, Again, I'm going into correct, admonish, and provide constant instruction. These 19 to 21-year-old kids that we have are not anywhere near adulthood yet. Sometimes I think I'm still not there yet either. What is it that I need to be doing? And let's continue this process with them. So when I go in tomorrow and I'm going to have to address those kids, I don't want to do it as a shotgun method where I just blast everybody and hope that the bullets hit the ones that need it, or do I go to the groups and talk about my disappointment, but also my understanding that Christ is disappointed with my behavior at times. We need to work and change those things, which are, and try to engage them. Will it work? Well, that's not ever for me I can't make those things work. I can't get my students to learn. Students learn. I don't learn for them. I can do my best to get them to want to learn. So that's what I'm going to try to do with them tomorrow in class as well.
Every week, John, we wrap up the podcast by thinking about how we as faculty engage in this integration of faith and learning. And what I can't help but think about is that's what we've been talking about for the last half hour is we haven't been talking about anything related to teaching and learning that isn't connected to faith. So as somebody who is relatively new to this journey, like I said, I'm in the end of my third year here at Taylor. Share with me a little bit. How are you at this point now where faith and learning are so tightly wound together? Is there are there resources that you go to? Are there certain authors that you read to think about this? Is it a philosophy or a paradigm shift? Help me think a little bit like John for a minute.
It's a journey. It's not an event. This is not something that I'm going to just go read a book and it will all change for me. I'm going to go back to one of the things that we chose for this podcast, actually this unit. It's engagement with your brothers and sisters who are educators here, who especially seem to have a grasp of this. I have learned next to people who share their moments where they have something in biology, let's say, and they could bring this out and say, isn't this amazing about who God is? And that impacts me. For example, I always share with my students, I know that you guys like sunsets and you like rainbows and all of this stuff. I said, give me a cell. Let me look at the nucleus, look at the DNA. And where am I trying to do is I'm trying to get them to say to them, you need to start understanding everything in perspective of that a God, and this is his. So if I have in my mindset, this is kind of like Brother Lawrence and practicing the presence of God. It's always thinking about God is in front of me. Everything I see, here's one of his students that he is having me. How do I constantly think and relate about anything? Has to be with an understanding it's God's. So underlying it becomes always listening to, oh, isn't that an amazing thing? That reminds me about this aspect or characteristic of God. I'm not as great as I got to sit in Laura Edwards' class the other day in Introduction to Psychology, and she's pulling out the verses, and I'm going, whoa, she knows the verses that go well with this. That may not necessarily be my style as much. Sometimes they do, but it is reflecting upon his word. And I do sense his word so many times. So for me, it becomes listening to that aspect. And it's not always about biology, but it is always about the student. Is whether they need to understand it about biology, or they need to understand about their character, or is it about something else? Is it about anything? I'm always trying to think in my mind, how can I have them see God in whatever it is that we're discussing? So, yeah, I'm a biologist. I think that's one of the easier areas to try to think about faith and learning. Mathematics. Well, how do you do that with numbers? But mathematicians who understand models and theories can see beauty in that, and they start to talk about how that reminds them about why? Because they know God's character and they understand his character, and it's always trying to share that constantly with the students that you're with.
It seems, John, it seems to me that your connection to the Spirit and your willingness, your enthusiasm about looking for the beauty drives this train of integration between what you're learning and what you're learning in biology and what you're learning in faith. To me, as a communicator and teaching students, whether it's public speaking or interpersonal communication, oftentimes we start with the brokenness of communication. But if I can help them see the parallels between beauty and a message communicated well, or a message communicated to an audience with care, or I can get them to think about a bit of beautiful prose that sparks imagination, that could be another avenue to thinking about faith in a way I don't think I had thought about before. So I'm really grateful for that encouragement, that prod to think about faith learning in terms of beauty, and inviting students to see beauty where they might not have seen it before. And that beauty is the love that the Creator has for us.
Well, think, especially in the sense with writing in words, if we want to go to just reading the words that Jesus spoke when he's on the Sermon on the Mount, and he's going, if you just read those things, all we have is his words. We never see him. We are getting that through his communication, and how words are, and language, and so powerful on revealing who he is. I like Mark Cosgrove because I'm going to compare my wife and Mark here. When my wife watches a movie, she gets all involved in the plot, and she can't see the theme. It distracts her from what's being said. Mark sees the themes, and he'll go, wasn't that such a great example of the depravity of man? And my wife's over here going, they were killing people, and Mark's pulled back, and he said, well, the author's trying to talk about how deprived being able to step back and understand what's the message, not just what's the words. And that comes across in so much of Jesus' writings.
It's come full circle, I think, for us, thinking about the people who sparked that passion, but how that passion then informs the way that we are seeking to improve. And when we're seeking to improve, we have to engage with other people. And what an opportunity I've had to engage with you. John, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation.
And thank you for asking me, and I hope it's of value to everyone.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks for being a part of the conversation. To make sure that you don't miss out on future episodes, be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app. To find additional resources, go to my.taylor.edu/faith faculty-development. We at the BCTLE want you to know how much we see and appreciate everything you are doing for your students. We believe in you, and we're here to support you. We hope that this conversation has encouraged you and equipped you to make Monday just a little bit better.